morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you, Brooklyn. Good morning. Welcome back. Welcome to day 2 of the Fair Housing Conference, sponsored by the San Diego Housing Federation and the San Diego Regional Alliance for Fair Housing. I want to thank you all for being here this morning. Also want to thank again our generous sponsors who make this event possible, the San Diego Housing Commission, City, and the California Housing Finance Agency, Cal HFA. So thank you to our sponsors. Hope you are all settled in with a good cup of coffee, a little bite to eat, ready for another rich morning of learning. Hope you all also had the chance to join us yesterday and enjoyed the content that we were able to hear from yesterday. We kind of took things at the big picture yesterday, starting off with HCD Director Gustavo Velasquez and a panel of speakers giving us that overview from the state and federal level on the affirmatively furthering fair housing law that we are here to kind of understand a bit more about, and then a panel that brought it back down a little bit to the local level, talking about fair housing and home ownership. Today, we're going to continue on our theme, learning about fair housing and what is being done at the local level to unravel segregation, the theme of this year's conference. We have a panel this morning that will talk about emergency rental assistance, and then late morning, our late morning session will be a panel of local elected officials talking about the work that they're doing in their cities to advance affirmatively furthering fair housing goals. So that's a little snapshot of what we're here for today and what we'll be learning from today. Again, welcome everyone. We're so glad you're here. Appreciate you taking the time. We know that you're all very busy. You have a lot going on, and we appreciate that you're here to learn with us all. And with that, I don't even know if I introduced myself. I'm Laura Nunn. I'm Chief of Policy and Education with the San Diego Housing Federation. But I want to turn it over to my friend Estella for her welcome and to get us started with today's first panel. Estella, please take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Estella Del Rios, President of the San Diego Regional Fair Housing Alliance. Thank you very much for joining us on Unraveling Segregation Day 2. It's great that you can join us in this intriguing conversation. As the nation faced the pandemic, tenants and landlords fell into an economic crisis for the housing market. In the housing market, this meant people lost their jobs, contracted COVID, and many other challenges. These traumatic experiences were immediately addressed by a rent moratorium and rental assistance. Today, we're going to have a full analysis by experts in this field that not only assisted low-income families, but they tracked the data. This panel today will discuss what the numbers reveal about housing stability, vulnerable households, tenant-landlord, and fair housing issues that arose from a fair housing perspective. We're welcoming today Nick Martinez, who is the Acting Assistant Director of Housing and Community Development for the Health, Human Services Agency, County of San Diego. We also have Valerie Brew, a Child Wellbeing and Family Wellness Department Director for South Bay Community Services Corporation, and Azucena Valodit, Executive Vice President of Rental Assistance and Workforce Development for the San Diego Housing Commission. So they are going to give us an overview of the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, and at the very end, we will have time for questions. Thank you, Nick Martinez. I would like to introduce you to give an overview. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Estella, and thank you for having us all here to share about ERAP. So we are here to talk about Emergency Rental Assistance Program and share what impacts and results we had within the community. But just to start us off, we wanted to give a little bit of a background and a history of what ERAP was, so that everybody understands where we're coming from. So emergency rental assistance funding was provided by the federal government to help eligible households who have been financially impacted by COVID-19 pandemic. Right, and the program provided payment assistance for renters who needed help with rent and utilities. The federal government provided that money directly to local governments, but also to the state government. And the state made that available to locals through block grants. So in total, in the region for San Diego, we were provided over $475 million to administer this emergency rent and utility assistance on behalf of the region. Next. The program assists with rent, utilities, and other housing expenses. We paid for back rent and also a little bit of future rent. Tenants and landlords were both able to start the application process. We had 3 localities in the region, the County of San Diego, City of San Diego, and the City of Chula Vista. And most had about the same program because of the funding source, with minor variations, which you'll notice there. In general, we all took applications between March 2021 and March 2022. And we had the portal available in multiple different languages. We also partnered with several community-based organizations to get the word out and help with applications. On the right, you'll see some eligibility criteria. You had to be a renter. You had to be a low income, 80% or less. You had to experience financial hardship due to COVID, and you had to be at risk of housing instability or at risk of experiencing homelessness or housing instability. With the funding source, we did have some mandated prioritization categories. So any application came in, we had to prioritize those that were below 50% AMI or that had household members that were unemployed for more than 90 days. We could also set local prioritization. So we all set prioritization for households facing eviction. And in the county, we also added a couple local prioritizations for single parent households and using the Healthy Places Index, which I'll speak to a little bit later on our slides. In general, the 3 jurisdictions operating ERAP knew that it was important to work together. And this is one example of how we did that. We set up a tool for the region where you could type in your address, you can find yourself on a map and determine which jurisdiction to apply to. This was important because we have landlords operating in multiple jurisdictions and they needed to know where they could apply. Also, people may not know, just the residents may not know exactly if they're on the border of a city or a county, which area they're in. So the entire San Diego County was covered either by one of these 3 jurisdictions. And again, we worked really closely to time the assistance and the program right together to share our messaging materials, to get the word out and really reach as many people as we could and provide this assistance. Let's see. So those are some of the main highlights of the program itself. And that's just kind of level set, get everybody understanding what the program is. Let's see. So with that, we're going to turn it over to each one of the jurisdictions to present a little bit more of how we did outreach and the results of that outreach, what outcomes came from the work that we did. So I'm going to turn it over to Valerie Brew with South Bay Community. And Valerie, if you don't mind sharing your screen, you can take over. Thank you very much.
Valerie, you're muted.
My apologies. Here we go again, everyone. I appreciate your patience. You'd think after 2 years of Zoom, I would be a little more savvy with this. Alrighty, here we go. Can everyone hear me okay? And see, wonderful. Again, I'm Valerie Brew with SBCS, formerly known as South Bay Community Services, and I oversee our agency's Child Wellbeing and Family Wellness Department, where our ERAP program is housed. And in case there are attendees today that don't know about our organization, I'm just going to spend a minute just talking about what SBCS does. And so we are a local private nonprofit organization that began in 1971. And so over the 51 years, we have provided comprehensive, multifaceted social service type services. And although we started in the South region of San Diego County, we are happy to report we do have services countywide. And currently we have 450 employees and we touch the lives of 50,000 people annually through our services. So I appreciate, Nick, that you gave a great overview of ERAP. And so I'm not going to go into the specific details of our program because they are what Nick highlighted. Rather, I'm just going to talk about some of the unique differences and the uniqueness in our program in Chula Vista. And the first is the amount of months a household was eligible in Chula Vista. In our jurisdiction, we limited that to 15 months. And there were 2 main reasons for that. The first is that we know, unfortunately, the city of Chula Vista was significantly impacted with COVID. In fact, if you look at the 2-year span, the city of Chula Vista has the second highest rates of COVID countywide, only to the city of Lemon Grove. So we wanted to make sure our funds reached as many households as possible. And the second reason for the 15-month cap is depending on the funding stream. One funding stream had a cap of 15 months and the other had a cap of 18 months. And so we wanted to make sure we were always in compliance with that regulation, as well as being fair and equitable to the number of months each household was eligible for. Another unique aspect of our program in Chula Vista is that we did limit our utilities to arrears only and 12 months. Again, capitalizing on those that really needed rental assistance. And we also leveraged housing stabilization resources, not through ERAP, but through other programming through our agency, again, to free up that money for rental assistance. And then finally, we did cap our number of months assisted through March, and that is because the city of Chula Vista has applied for a cash flow loan with the state of California to pay for the remaining applications in our portal, and the state does not allow payment for rent or utility arrears past March. And I do want to note before I begin with this next slide that the city of Chula Vista, I should have noted that, is actually the recipient of the ERAP funds from the federal and state. And they've actually subcontracted SBCS to be the local administrator. And it's been a wonderful partnership. I'll tell you, the city of Chula Vista has been so supportive, and it's an honor to actually partner with them. And with that said, the city of Chula Vista and our agency had about 5 or 6 weeks to actually get everything launched and ready to go by the mandate of March 15th. And so I could really spend this whole time talking about all the outreach and preparation we did. It was extensive. So I'm just going to focus on a few things that the city did. The first is they established formal meetings with each utility provider in Chula Vista to train them on ERAP, but more importantly, to talk about their own marketing and outreach for their customers that are receiving utility services from them. They also met with 3 housing associations to make sure that those property owners and property managers and landlords were well equipped come March 15th to help their tenants apply for ERAP. And the final unique thing that the city of Chula Vista did was they provided formal notification to all property owners who had a registered business license for rental properties in the city of Chula Vista. Then if we look at what we've done with ongoing outreach and marketing, we really used a multi-layered, multi-pronged approach. And we started first and foremost with our staff. We leveraged our internal resources within SBCS. So every employee of our organization that provides direct service was formally trained in ERAP and received access to the portal so that they could, throughout this past year, help their own clients apply for ERAP. And we also knew that there was no way we were going to be able to be successful without the partnership with excellent, trusted organizations in our community. So just like we did with SBCS staff, we actually met with 7 trusted organizations locally and formally trained their staff who work with their patients and clients so that they could help them with that. And I wanted to give a shout out to those organizations because, again, we were not successful without their help. We had 3 health organizations, and that was Scripps, Family Health Centers, and San Ysidro Health. We also formally trained MAC Project, the center who focuses on our LGBTQ community, Meals on Wheels, which we know they serve a very vulnerable population. And then finally, the Chula Vista Community Collaborative, which was really important for us because we definitely wanted to have a concentrated effort on reaching households that have minor children. And the collaborative actually operates and manages 6 family resource centers on the campus of schools in the city of Chula Vista. Our ERAP team was also very grassroots. So in addition to processing applications on a daily basis, they were out there in the community attending events. And it wasn't just tabling. We actually brought technology and equipment with us so that anyone attending these community events, we could actually help them apply right then and there, as well as scan and upload required documents for their application. And a few examples of what we did, we were at food distribution events at local schools, vaccine events, and most recently tax clinics. And we found that that was a really important strategy. And then finally, we did tons of just traditional media, including TV, printed news, radio ads, and a wealth of social media outlets. And I know the San Diego Housing Commission is going to share a little bit more about that in a little more detail. So I'm not going to repeat what they're going to repeat, but we did found all those strategies really, really helpful with that. And then finally, regarding outreach and marketing, what I'm most proud of, and I think what was most important, is that our particular program was live from the very beginning. And in fact, as an organization, we never shut down. So the minute COVID happened, our office in Chula Vista remained live and open for our community. And that was the same and true for ERAP. So our entire ERAP team has been live from the very beginning. And it was shocking of how many people came in live, whether it was a walk-in or appointment to get help. But kind of what surprised us the most was the landlords seeking that live, warm, one-on-one help. We were anticipating landlords were maybe a little more tech savvy, less of a digital divide, but especially our mom and pop landlords and our landlords that were seniors really capitalized on this. And then a final thing I'd note here is, again, we also kind of went old school with flyers as well as banners. So we just saturated the business community with flyers. The County of San Diego, HHSA was a wonderful partner in distributing flyers at their Live Center in Chula Vista. We had specialized banners made, and we rotated those banners throughout this past year at school sites and other locations. So again, those are just a few examples of the things that we did with ongoing marketing and outreach. Now for the data. I'm a data person, so this is my favorite part of the presentation. We have a wealth of data, but we're going to highlight data specifically on households that were assisted. And for our organization, that is between our launching date of March 15, 2021 through April 10th of this month, 2022. So you can see here, we had approximately $35.6 million allocated specifically for rent and utility assistance. And you can see by the final bullet point, we've dispersed almost the entire amount of that money. And I know we're much smaller than the Housing Commission and the county in terms of the allocated funding. We are small, but we're mighty. You can see on the right that on average is $91,000 every day our fiscal department was dispersing out into our community to our needed households. Big picture with data. So you can see here, we received 7,748 submitted applications into our portal. And year to date, we have served and assisted 2,858 residential renters in Chula Vista with ERAP assistance. And on average, each household averaged a little over $12,000 in assistance. Now I'm shifting to demographic data. So what do the households look like that we assisted? Who are we helping? And we're first starting with the zip code. You can see here that 3/4 of our households assisted reside in the 91910 and 91911 zip codes. And this heat map is a great illustration. I think this is a great visual that shows our outreach efforts, did work. The blue dots represent those 2,858 applications awarded. And the black outline is actually the jurisdiction of the city of Chula Vista. And you can see throughout the entire jurisdiction, households have received ERAP assistance. But I want to call attention to the north and the northeast, the 02 and the 14 zip codes. There are a few that have been assisted, but not many. And that's because it's mainly owner-occupied units and a more affluent community. And then down low at the southeast, where you do see less blue, that is because it is not a residential area of the city of Chula Vista. So now moving on to ethnicity and race, 70% of our applicants who applied on behalf of their household self-identified as Latinx. And then when we look at race, the most self-identified is mixed race at 42%. Followed by those that identified as white at 38%, and then Black or African-American at 12.5%. So with gender, you can see here over 2/3 of the applicants that submitted the application on behalf of their household were females. And we had 57% of them that were between the ages of 30 and 50 years old. And then finally, to me, this is the most important data set is area median income, because this really, to me, affirms the families that needed it the most got our ERAP assistance. You can see here 3/4 of our families fell at or below 30% of our area median income for San Diego County. And to put that in perspective for you, that means a family of 4 cannot make more than $36,000. So I do believe that this data does illustrate the funds got into our most needy residents of the city of Chula Vista. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to the San Diego Housing Commission, who's going to present on their outreach and data for their ERAP program.
Good morning, getting my slides up. All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Azucena Valladolid. I'm the Executive Vice President of Rental Assistance and Workforce Development for the San Diego Housing Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this panel discussion on fair housing and rental assistance. I always appreciate my relationships with the county and Chula Vista, so it's an honor to be on the panel with both Nick and Valerie. So the San Diego Housing Commission operates the City of San Diego COVID-19 Housing Stability Assistance Program, which launched last year, March 15th. And we kept it open for a little bit more than a year right before closing our application on March 31st of this year. To reach a diverse population of households with low income throughout the city of San Diego, the Housing Commission did conduct a pretty comprehensive outreach campaign for this program. We collaborated with city council members, Housing Commission board members, educational institutions, labor organizations, utility providers, and additional community groups. This included contracting with 10 community-based organizations to raise awareness and help households complete their applications, including those who did not have internet access. These community-based organizations provided assistance in as many as 20 different languages. And we also had 2 additional organizations contract with the Housing Commission to raise awareness in the communities that they served. We also contracted with 211 San Diego to answer questions and to help households complete and submit applications. To support these outreach efforts, the Housing Commission developed an outreach kit that we made available through a page on our website. The outreach kit included the program logo, flyers, Q&A, and suggested social medias for other community organizations to post. We also added news releases, instructional videos, and additional materials to the outreach kit as the program continued. Our outreach also included presentations and communication to landlords to help them understand the program and the help that was available. The administrative funding that was available through this program supported paid advertising as well. This included MTS ads in English and Spanish on billboards, bus benches, buses, trolleys, and transit shelters. We focused these ads in council districts 4, 8, and 9. So basically like the trolley line from San Isidro all the way down to downtown San Diego. Television ads in both English and Spanish also were broadcasted on local television stations. These ads featured Mayor Todd Gloria and City Council Member Vivian Moreno. Cox Communications also supported the program by broadcasting a free public service announcement about 100 times within 1 month. Community newspapers and newsletters were also an important part of the outreach to reach a diverse group of communities. We placed ads in a variety of publications shown on the slide, which included San Diego Voice and Viewpoint, Asian Journal San Diego, El Latino, and Filipino Press. Earned media through news coverage helped raise awareness about the program and where to obtain additional information. There was about 5 news conferences about the program that also helped us generate news coverage through local media outlets. We also recognized that we needed direct outreach to households that may not have access to broadcast or the digital media and social media posts that we were advertising. So we ended up mailing informational postcards, both in English and in Spanish, to approximately 175,000 households. These households lived in the 10 city zip codes with the highest COVID case rates throughout the city of San Diego. We also mailed postcards to about 25,000 households throughout the city of San Diego that had income below $100,000 per year. And thousands of informational flyers were mailed to deed restricted affordable rental housing properties for the property managers to distribute to their low income residents. The outreach campaign required collaboration to reach as many households as possible. We ended up providing thousands of printed flyers, both in English and in Spanish, to council members' offices, the San Diego and Imperial Counties Labor Council, San Diego Food Bank, and the San Diego and San Isidro school districts. The Housing Commission also collaborated with SDG&E and the city's Public Utilities Department to include inserts about our program in their mailings to their utility customers. In addition to all of these outreach efforts, the Housing Commission sent emails and text messages as well. For example, we sent emails to more than the 90,000 households that are on the Housing Commission's Section 8 waiting list. And we also collaborated with the United Domestic Workers, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Local 3930, to reach their own members. They ended up sending a max text message to about 30,000 home care workers and an additional 5,000 child care workers. It was a lot of effort, even starting with our own Board of Commissioners. We had two specific Board of Commissioners that ended up helping us with connecting us with other community-based organizations and scheduling conversations and allowing us to expand our collaborative efforts throughout the community to getting the word out. Both our Commissioner Mitch Mitchell and Johanna Hester were pretty imperative to our outreach campaign. To help households with their applications, we also created instructional videos, both in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese that we posted on our website. We ended up sending these links to landlord organizations, tenant organizations, and to households throughout the city so that they can understand and know firsthand how to actually submit an application. City Council member Sean Ela Rivera, Monica Montgomery Stepp, and Vivian Moreno and their staff also canvassed communities that they serve to raise awareness as well. Even with all of these outreach efforts and assistance activities, we found that in-person assistance was extremely important to help households apply for assistance. So we collaborated with many organizations to hold outreach and application assistance events in person. We were able to invite members from particular communities on site to help them complete applications. California Governor Gavin Newsom's office, SDG&E, and the San Diego and Imperial Counties Labor Council were among the organizations that made these events possible. And we ended up hosting events in City Heights, Encanto, and Skyline Hills. So on to the data. So since the launch of the program up until the date that we closed it on March 31st of this year, we received over 48,000 submitted applications for help. And as of April 13th, we issued payments totaling more than $196 million to assist over 16,800 unique households throughout the city of San Diego. On average, we saw that each household received, on average, more than $11,600 in assistance. All of the funds that were available for this program has been expended up until this past Tuesday, when City Council gave us authorization and approval for additional funding to continue to extend the program. So with these additional funds that we anticipate receiving, we will be able to help more households who submitted their applications by March 31st for rent and utilities that are due through the month of March of 2022. The households who've received help from this program are among those with the lowest income. Like Valerie in the city of Chula Vista, we also saw that more than 75% of the payments were issued to households at or below 30% area median income. And an additional close to 20% reported income between 31 and 50%. When we break down the assistance payments by breakdown by a zip code, we see that the highest zip codes or areas that received assistance payments is 92101, which includes downtown San Diego, which has received close to 10% of the payments that we've issued to date. 92105, which includes City Heights and Oak Park, received approximately 7.2% of the payments that we issued. 92115, which includes Talmadge, and Rolando, received about 6%, and on. You can see the different areas and zip codes that received assistance here. Sorry, I think my computer's trying to launch an update in the wrong time. There you go. On the next few slides, you'll see some demographic information on the applications that were received. So you'll see that approximately 44% of the individuals who received assistance through this program were between the ages of 40 and 61. And women make up about 60% of the applications that were submitted. Approximately 37% of those who received assistance identified themselves as Hispanic or Latino, which is slightly higher than the 35% of applications who submitted an application. Similarly, the percentages of assisted households by race are consistent with the percentages of total applicants who self-reported their race. So for example, applicants who self-reported themselves as being Black or African American represented about 19.9% of the submitted applications and 21% of the assistance payments that were issued. So they're pretty much in line with each other. This slide shows the breakdown of submitted applications by zip code. The highest percentage of applications came from zip codes 92101, followed by 92105, 92115, et cetera. So again, they're pretty much in line with the application payments that were dispersed. So I think we're holding questions to the end of the presentation. So I'll turn it over to Nick to present on information from the County of San Diego.
Thank you, Azucena. So I'll try and be mindful not to go over some of the same things that have been shared in the last two, because we all had very similar approaches. What I think makes the County of San Diego's program a little bit different is that you'll see on the map here, we represented 16 cities plus about 26 unincorporated communities. And we made awards in all 16 of those cities, plus a lot of the unincorporated communities. You'll see our numbers here are 65,000 applications taken, 20,000 applications, households were awarded, and we paid over 192 million on behalf of those households. And as of yesterday, it's at 197, so we're still processing. The average award is about 9,600 per household. And again, those are the numbers, some of the outcomes of what we've done. And we'll show a little bit more on the heat map that we have prepared to show how that was distributed. But again, we had a daunting task of having to get this information and out there to 16 different cities, plus all of the unincorporated areas. How we were going to do that, it was a very daunting task. So we ended up doing many of the same things as the Housing Commission and City of Chula Vista. And some of those included monthly landlord webinars. So engaging with those landlords, because landlords are aware of who is behind on rent, and they were important partners in applying for the program. Monthly meetings with the cities within our county's jurisdiction. So we met with cities of San Marcos, National City, Encinitas, El Cajon, Santee, Vista. We met with a lot of these cities within our jurisdiction in order to leverage their communication networks, to leverage their connections within the community. And we had ongoing conversations with them. They also had other smaller programs that may have been taking applications at the same time, so we had to coordinate that as well. We did presentations to county and community partners throughout the region. We leveraged the county's COVID response network. So that was the network of different sectors that was set up to get the word out about tracing, treatment, vaccinations, all those different things. There are 12 different sectors, from the rural sector to the faith-based organization sector to the homeless sector, the healthcare, on and on. We had these sectors built for COVID response that we then leveraged and put the word out. We used the county's health workers called promotoras, which really were embedded within the community and used culturally responsive ways of getting that word out. So again, another way that we got the word out in the community using community members. We did 55 outreach events throughout the county at food banks, farmers markets, vaccination events. And you'll see some of our staff pictured here. Again, so we send people out in the community, not only our ERAP staff, but also using community partners, community networks, the cities that we represent, and really spreading the word. We had resources out there, just like the Housing Commission. We contracted with 211. We also had our own phone agents that used, that translated. We had translation lines. We had several community-based organizations. A big thank you to them because they were able to help us not only spread the word, but help applicants apply through the portal and also gather their verification documents. We created a website toolkit for the community, including how-to videos, email blasts that they could use, flyers, and other materials that were available. Next. So here's an example of one of the flyers that we used and a picture of a press release that we put out. We did print, radio, and digital. Over 800,000 postcards were sent, really trying to bridge that digital divide for the communities that really need it. We did print ads in 12 newspapers in various languages. We did social media, mass emails and text, flyers. These are some of the numbers of information that we put out there to the community. Here's our data. So it's very similar to what you saw with the other two programs. Race and ethnicity are broken down there, over 31%, Hispanic or Latino. Female made up over 60% of the applications awarded. The Healthy Places Index. That's an important one for us. Our county board of supervisors set up a prioritization for Healthy Places Index, which is a map which maps data on social conditions that drive health outcomes like education, job opportunities, clean air and water, and other indicators that positively associate with life expectancy. So the lowest quartiles have less access to those things. And really, we targeted a lot of the communication outreach, and it reflects in our data that 50% were in that lowest quartile. Almost 75% were in the two lowest quartiles of the Healthy Places Index. And we also reached the lowest income of folks that within our jurisdiction. You'll see about 62% were extremely low income, and then up to another 25% between 30 and 50% AMI. So those are some of the outcomes. Again, this is our award data. So we were able to reach a significant amount of population, and we're also to reach the population that we were trying to, the folks that needed it the most. Here is, again, that heat map that I indicated earlier. So again, a large jurisdiction, you can see that the heavier concentrations are in the more urban areas. We do have some smaller dots out in the unincorporated areas. It's kind of hard to see there. But we did have, 23% of our awards go to the unincorporated area. Let's see. So the third and fourth quartiles are the ones that are in the darker colors there, and you'll actually be able to see that we really targeted communication. And we really were able to focus those awards in the areas that needed it most. Let's see. So that's highlights of our county program. Again, we're still processing. We still have some funds to expend and applications in the system. We're also anticipating those additional federal funds that are coming through reallocation process from the federal government. And so we are still processing and trying to serve as many people as we can who are in need. So again, that's the county's program. And I think that's it. We'll turn it back over to Estella for the panel discussion portion. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Nick, Susana, and Valerie. This was all very interesting data and a great overview of the program. I mean, 197,000 million, that's awesome. And all the outreach meetings, the presentations and networking. Thank you so much for that overview. We'd like to talk about some of the key factors in the success of reaching our target populations. Let's discuss community partnerships. What roles did those play? Anyone, if you'd like to please answer.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Susana.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think all of our presentations, you heard a lot of similarities and sort of working on the same thing. And that was very deliberate. The 3 jurisdictions have been collaborating and working together since the onset of the program. We really leverage each other's knowledge and sort of technical expertise. So all of us really tapped into the use of community-based organizations and other nonprofits to both help us with themselves conducting outreach within the communities that they serve, to really spread the word about the program that's available and the application portal and where to apply and how to obtain assistance. Some of the community-based organizations, or CBOs that we like to call them, also helped with assisting clients or applicants to actually submit applications on our behalf. They helped with attending some of the in-person events when it was time to, conduct application assistance events. So they were very imperative to both getting the word out in the community, helping our clients submit applications, and then showing up to in-person events. So it was really a community-wide sort of effort.
Great. What were some of the tools that made this program accessible? For example, did you use mapping tools?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we did start with that regional landing page that we built for the community so that people could find out where they were located and find the appropriate jurisdiction to work with. We all used a similar, the same software provider to do our application portals. And that was real important because we had landlords that were operating in the different jurisdictions. The fact that they had a similar interface, that they were able to know the process. Same with the tenants. It's good for them to have that look and feel. We were able to use something that was able to translate into different languages. Notices went out in different languages. A lot of those things really helped with the ease of use for the different stakeholders between the landlords and the tenants.
Great. Did you find that there were some challenges? If there were challenges, what were some of those challenges? Like, what didn't work as planned?
I can speak to some of that. So I think I gave a pretty comprehensive overview on the outreach efforts that we conducted. And that's only because we really put a lot of emphasis on really ramping up the outreach. And so what we found is that some of the efforts that we put money into really didn't yield positive results when we saw the applications come in, right? So there was some money that was spent on paid advertisements, like the MTS bus ads and some of the paid advertisements. And ironically, we didn't really see applicants being driven to our application portal because of the paid advertisements. For every application that was submitted, we asked how they heard about it. So that was something that we definitely learned. Nick and his team over at the county, along with the Housing Commission, I think that Chula Vista may have as well, we actually implemented and launched an emergency rental assistance program in 2020. So this was like our second time sort of running a program, but it was multiplied by 1,000,000%, right? The program was far greater than the initial one that we saw. So we went into developing and implementing this program that we're talking about with some previous knowledge about what did and didn't work, which is why you see that we all use the same portal moving forward. We pretty much contracted with 211 to provide the same services. We learned to contract with community-based organizations, which were all things that we didn't do in the first smaller emergency rental assistance program.
I know as a fair housing agency, we did provide rental assistance for the city of El Cajon, and some of the challenges for our agency was gathering documentation from the tenants. Did you find that challenging as well? I mean, sometimes you had clients saying that, unemployment wouldn't give them the verifications. Employers were not cooperating. Did you find any of those challenges with your clients?
Start off with that. I know as a jurisdiction, we had the tough decision. We could have started our program by allowing a household to submit an application without the supporting required documents, or they'd have to have the required documents prior to submittal. And we chose to have applicants be able to submit in the portal without the supporting documents at that point, because we knew, particularly in Chula Vista, there is a digital divide. So I think that was one positive thing to help remove any barriers to people applying. But we definitely had applicants that had challenges in getting that, and that's where we get creative. And so if they're unable to get a document from unemployment, what else can we utilize to verify? This is a low barrier program, which has a lot of positives with it being low barrier. Applicants could self-attest to certain things under penalty of perjury. But it's amazing how when one document isn't able to be provided, that we can get creative and find other source documentation that will validate what we're needing. And so we were very flexible with that.
That's good to hear, because I know that there was some challenges with our families gathering that information. Wanted to ask, what did you learn about the program, ERAP? You know, how can we improve it for continued success? It sounds like this 200 million that was allocated in the San Diego region was close to it. You know, you met the 197 million. So that says in itself it was successful. But from your perspective, each one of you, what did you learn about this program and how can we improve it?
Yeah, I think we learned that there was a significant need. I think there was, you know, it was a very timely response, and it was a challenge to implement because it was such an immediate need. People were, you know, on the verge of losing housing because they couldn't pay their rent because they've been impacted by COVID. And so I think that was the challenge that I think we rose up to. And I think each one of the jurisdictions that operated the money, the ERAP money, was able to help tremendously throughout the community. So I think that was something that was a success from the program. Is there was a need. We were able to rise up, build a program really quickly and implement and get it out in the community.
Great.
And I would just add to that in terms of a challenge. I do agree with Nick that I think this ERAP program really highlighted the tremendous need. And we knew that there was a housing need and a housing crisis prior to the onset of COVID, and COVID significantly exacerbated our housing crisis here locally. So it would be nice, I think, in future ERAP programs, if there can be pairings with helping with self-sufficiency, because even the continued need, the level of need beyond this emergency rental assistance program, because this was meant to be an emergency intervention, right, to help our landlords and tenants, you know, stabilize their housing situation. So I think food for thought for future programming, again, pairing with maybe some financial literacy opportunities and things like that too, because the need is so great beyond COVID.
Great, great. We do have some questions from the audience. Michelle Marano would like to know, of the applicants that you received, how many non-English were you able to assist? If you have that data, applications received in non-English languages.
Yeah, we all tracked the primary language that they would like to have communication circulated through, but I don't think any of us have that information now to share. It's definitely something we can probably follow up and share with Housing Federation if it's something that you're interested in sharing outwards to your members.
Yeah, no, I know it's difficult to track every factor, right, when it comes to data, but you did have a good range there. Also, there's a question that they're asking in, will there be a research or rental assistance need in your opinion? I believe you mentioned already that you were approved yesterday for more rental assistance and utility assistance through the month of March. I believe you mentioned that, but will there be do you know if there'll be a research of rental assistance in the future?
Yeah, that's definitely difficult to forecast, right? So I know that we do have the applications that are still in process that we have. We're still working through a lot of the need that was built up over those first 2 years. So I think that's significant that we're still working through that backlog. and continuing to process applications that we've received all the way through March of 2020. Any other thoughts on that one?
I think what we've learned is that there's always going to be a need for both affordable housing, right, for the permanent supportive long-term housing, but there is a need for like some type of emergency rental assistance on an ongoing basis, even if it's not directly tied to the COVID-19 pandemic. I think as housing operators, we do see on an ongoing basis, inquiries and callers of people saying, the waiting list for Section 8 is far too long. I just need a couple months of assistance because I've had a temporary hardship. So I think that there's been some spinoffs as a result of that. I think Nick can speak to the spinoff emergency rental assistance programs or smaller programs that sort of derived out of the funding received. I know that there's been some consideration at the level of the city of San Diego for continued ongoing sort of pilot program of emergency rental assistance. Definitely think that there's a need for something like this on a permanent long-term basis. The problem is, where do we find the money to administer that?
Right, that was the next question from one of our audiences. How do we make this a permanent program? Because there was already a need before the pandemic, right? And this just, put a Band-Aid on the need because it just prolonged the rental assistance. I mean, you pay your rent for the past 3 months, but then you still owe for the past 6 months or so forth. We found that out, when we assisted our clients. So I see this as a need for the future. So what is your perspective, Valerie? I see you nodding your head.
Yes, absolutely. Obviously I can't speak on behalf of the city of Chula Vista as a jurisdiction, but as a representative of SBCS and a local nonprofit organization, we actually provide housing solutions for our community, ranging from emergency housing to transitional housing to permanent supportive housing. But we also do provide homeless prevention. And I think that's where the biggest gap is. For our households that are unsheltered, granted, there are still tremendous need there, but we are actively pursuing grant and funding opportunities for homeless prevention. So those that are at imminent risk of being evicted. And I do believe that needs to be ongoing funding streams for that. And as an organization, we are dedicated and committed to continuing to apply for funding for that.
Great.
Yeah, and Susanna, thank you for teeing that up for me. We did have a couple of programs that did spin off of ERAP, the larger effort, and some of it was board driven, board funded through ARPA funding. We created a rental assistance for small landlords program, and that was really to help the local economy because we have landlords, small mom and pop landlords that are operating in San Diego, and that was a region wide program, so it encompassed all 18 cities in the unincorporated.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention that about the landlords.
Yeah, and it really filled a need for those small landlords, but also for the folks that may have not qualified for ERAP for whatever reason. If they were over income or for some other reason we couldn't qualify them under ERAP, it filled that gap there as well. So it really helped out small landlords and renters that were in need. And then we also, our board created a security deposit assistance program. And really, that really took off when we opened that program. There was I think a pent up need for people to, potentially relocate, find something that's more affordable, or get out of a situation that they're in right now and find a new place. And so we've had a tremendous response on that program. And again, it kind of highlights the market that we're in, the affordability that we're seeing, and some of those trends. Again, as Susanna and Valerie were talking about, we're operating multiple programs in using the housing market. The existing housing stock. And so, these types of programs, there's definitely a need out there. Again, we've gotten tremendous response on ERAP, rental assistance for small landlords, and that security deposit assistance program.
Yeah, thank you. I want to touch a little bit on the landlords because, as you all know, landlords have to pay their mortgages as well. So they were hit pretty hard with this economic crisis. A lot of landlords were very compassionate and others weren't. But I do know there was some challenges where landlords refused to be part of the program. Can any of you touch a little bit on this and how do you remedy those challenges with the landlords, please?
So there was so in the original program that we conducted in 2020, the funding that we received only allowed payments to be directed to landlords. We were not able to issue payments to tenants. So if the landlord denied participation, then that household went unserved. I think some of those found solutions where we used admin funding, our own local unrestricted funds to help a very small number of households who had landlords that didn't participate. But I think what the Treasury and the state did in this emergency rental assistance program that was different, which lended to a greater success of people being assisted and preventing evictions, is that they allowed the funding to go to the landlord first, but if they declined to participate, then we were allowed to issue that past due rental payment directly to the tenants so that they can pay their landlord directly. So I think that was a huge benefit and allowing more participation and allowing more people to remain stably housed. I think with this program, there was a lot of changes along the way that we all advocated for, and we were successful at, working with the council members, our, board of supervisors and congressmen all the way up to the state to make some pretty significant changes to the rules that the state had applied. So at the beginning of this emergency rental assistance program, landlords were asked to waive like 20% of the past or the rental amount that was past due. So we were seeing some landlords just refusing to participate because they didn't want to waive that balance, and nor should they have been asked to do that. The state then made some modifications to the program, which allowed us to issue 100% of the payments, which is when we really saw a significant spike in the number of applications coming in from both tenants and landlords. And that is really where we saw the tide change, when we saw a dramatic increase in the number of applications being submitted and the amount of money being sent out. So I think when you pose unnecessary restrictions to a landlord community, you'll see less sort of participation. But in this case, because that was changed, we were able to successfully administer the program.
That's good to hear that you were able to make that decision, to some, people were relying on that rental assistance.
And I think it was evidenced by a majority in all three programs. A majority of the payments went straight to the landlord, which is where it was direct. It was supposed to go, right? And so that was a testament not only to that some of those changes that were made that eased some of the restrictions on how we could use those funds, but also the work that our staff and our teams were doing in engaging with those landlords and making sure that we had their information, that everything was straight with them, so that we could make that payment directly to them. So it was a lot of work to get there, but again, majority of the payments went to the landlords directly.
Great. So we have a couple of more questions and comments. One of them is, what lessons can we learn about the outreach efforts of ERAP that can be applied to connect communities with other housing assistance programs?
I think I really can't stress enough the importance of the grassroots efforts that we all did. While technology has advanced our ability to reach thousands of households through technology and social media, what COVID highlighted for us and I think countywide is we do see a digital divide. And so I think those efforts where we are going out in the community, going to events, doing things in person, face-to-face as much as possible, dedicating those resources to make that happen. I know for our local jurisdiction was really beneficial and helpful. So I think I would recommend that. That was kind of one lesson learned from us.
Great. I do know, as a fair housing provider, we did have some challenges where some of these landlords and tenants did go through some discriminatory potential complaints in regards to fair housing. One of them was source of income. How did source of income fair housing protections come into play with the ERAP funding, if at all, in your opinion? Did you see any of those comments from landlords or anything to do with, their source of income?
I can speak for the city of San Diego. So we do have a source of income ordinance within the city of San Diego that was, I think, enacted in 2018. However, we didn't necessarily see a source of income issue within our programs. I think the question originally goes back to the original discussion that we had about landlords refusing to waive any of the balances that were due to them. Once we were allowed to pay them 100% of past due balances or rent that was due. We saw great participation in our program. So the source of where the funding was coming from wasn't necessarily an issue, even though we asked for certain information from them before we can disperse payments, right? So all of us required bank account information or a mailing address where we can send a check. We all required like either a 1099 for our records, and these were all requirements that the Treasury had posed. EIN number, DUNS number, things like that. So landlords were very willing to provide that information in order to get the check. And I think what you see is that, you know, I think the average payment from the county was like almost $10,000. Average payment from the city was like $11,000. So landlords are receiving a significant payment and making themselves whole from applicants who, some of them hadn't paid rent in up to 18 months. So I think they were just willing to participate to get the money that was owed to them.
Yeah, I think we had the question come up a couple of times, but it wasn't a significant issue where landlords were saying, I'm not going to accept a check from the county or something like that. So it did come up early on, but I think, you know, it was mostly, again, a testament to the landlord team, we call them, our staff that were working with the landlords and talking about, you know, the positives of working with the program. And like Azucena was saying, significant amounts of money that people owed were taken care of by the program without having to go through any kind of court process, without having to spend money on, you know, an eviction. The real, I think, focus was us building that relationship with the landlord, getting their trust, getting them to, you know, make sure that they participated in the program as well.
So I'm hearing that the landlords, for the most part, were very cooperative in receiving these funds.
Yes,
Great.
I would say in general, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes, and for us, out of the 2,858 households assisted, 97% of the payment went to landlords. So we only had 88 payments where it went to the tenant directly, but our vast majority of our landlords were extremely grateful and appreciative of the assistance, and were willing to submit whatever they could, even on behalf of their tenant. You know, we had quite a few landlords that submitted applications on behalf of their tenants and assisted their tenants in uploading documents. So that was the majority of what we experienced with our landlords, and being extremely grateful as well.
Awesome. So in your opinion, each one of you, what do you believe would be any improvement to the ERAP program, if any? It sounds like, you know, the tracking of the data and the success rate of assisting low to moderate income families was very successful. The landlords accepting the rents were very successful. We did speak about a little bit about the challenges, but what would you improve of the ERAP, if anything, so that we can move forward?
I think there was some restrictions that were imposed upon us about a restriction or added guidelines that came into play when a tenant moved out of a unit and still had a remaining past due rent balance that was owed to a landlord. So under AB 832, there were added protections that allowed us to make payments to landlords where their tenant had moved out, but there was an end date, right? I think it was like September or something like that. So after that point, if there was applications submitted and a tenant did move out without paying that rent, then our program was not able to make that landlord whole. So I think that would be something that should be looked upon, because again, the program I think has a dual purpose, is to prevent people from being displaced and becoming homeless, but then also to help out that landlord. So that, I think that would be definitely something that I would look into, is being able to pay that rental debt, if you will.
I had mentioned a little bit ago too about maybe pairing the financial assistance with some self-sufficiency services. But we also saw a gap where there were applicants that never became behind on rent. And so because legislation required that we prioritize households with rental arrears, we found that there were applicants who borrowed from family members, took out loans, maxed out credit cards and things like that just to make ends meet. And so if we could look at maybe expanding the eligibility criteria or priority populations, maybe for those still lower income households that were able to make ends meet, but we're behind on rent and maybe having a carve out for those households as well.
I'd say one of the program restrictions that we had was a maximum cap on a number of months that we could assist households, right? And that included both their utility and their rental assistance. So if they got 1 month of utility assistance but didn't get rent assistance, that counted as a month of assistance toward their max. And I think in some cases where it was pretty close, to, hey, I had, X amount of months in rental assistance, and early on I applied for utility assistance, but not rental assistance because I was able to keep up. Their 18 months had already been used up to a point, right? And so I think one thing that would have been nice to be more flexible with that 18 months max that included both rent and utility. If we could have had a little bit more flexibility there, I think we could have helped out some people in those instances where they needed a little bit extra help.
That's a good point. I did see that when we did receive the funding from the city of El Cajon. I did see that the utility and the rental was, there was a challenge there for clients. They had to choose and select which one was more important, correct? So we have some questions from the audience and comments. The first one is there a way to capture data from the recipients on their housing outcomes after receiving the maximum assistance? And same for the owners that received assistance. Are they keeping the tenants in place? Are they raising the rents? Or are they terminating the tenancy?
Let's see.
I know right now our design isn't set up to track post-award, so we don't have the immediate capability to track the long-term outcome. Did that family remain in the unit? So we don't have that ability right now to track that. But maybe for future programming, that might be actually an added benefit when we're looking at future programming to add that as a longer-term outcome to track.
Right. Did the county find many instances of tenants or landlords trying to obtain rental assistance from multiple providers? Did you find that to be true in any of the city-funded programs? That's one of the questions from our audience.
Let's see. So I think because we were working so closely together, there were the 3 jurisdictions. There were some areas like right on the border of different between the cities and the counties. Where people either were trying to apply to 2 different systems at once, or just legitimately didn't know which system to apply for, and so they were doing that type of thing. I think it was beneficial again that we were so tied in together in communication, and then also our IT software wise, that we were able to really identify where people should really apply, and so really try to minimize that overlap in programs. We also, within the county, we had those other smaller cities that had programs that they had set up prior to the federal government giving us the larger amount of ERAP. And so again, we did continuous coordination with them to identify duplicate applications to make sure that we weren't paying on the same tenant for the same months at the same time. And again, it was legit that they could apply at these 2 different programs, but it was on the local jurisdictions to make sure that the recipient only got paid once. So I think it was the communication, it was the ongoing, coordination between jurisdictions that helped out with that situation.
So you mentioned software. The software did assist with tracking, an application from another jurisdiction that applied in your jurisdiction, because I did find out, as a fair housing provider, we did have tenants calling us and saying, well, I did apply with this city. Can we apply with the other city because there's more funding? We had that question over and over. So I'm glad that you had a system in place to provide that information. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think the application portal was set up so that you couldn't apply on the same application or address twice. So within our program, you couldn't apply for assistance twice, but we would look at your address and be able to identify that. It would also try to lock out addresses from other jurisdictions. So if there was a city of San Diego jurisdiction applying within the county of San Diego, that address they couldn't apply. So that's the software barrier that we tried to establish so that people understood that, oh man, I cannot apply on this system. I better find the correct one to apply to.
It sounds like it was a good system to work from.
Yeah, it was a pleasure working with the other jurisdictions. We really were trying to coordinate as much as we could to make sure that we took care of folks as much as we could.
Right. Do you see any, is there any other comments or information you'd like to share in regards to the data collection? I know you mentioned all the overview and the challenges and the successes. Any other important comments that you'd like to share?
I think I'll share one thing that we found pretty interesting, and the fact that with the funding, the current funding that we have to administer, landlords were allowed to submit an application on the behalf of a tenant. However, there were restrictions that required a tenant to certify or sign off on the application before it can be considered as complete. But the number of applications that were attempted to be submitted by landlords was extremely low. I think in our program, only 6 to 8% of all of the applications that were initiated started with a landlord. So I thought that with the flexibility of allowing landlords to start that process and be able to coordinate with their tenants would really drive up the number of applications that were submitted by property managers, landlords, et cetera. But we didn't see that in our program at all.
I think one thing that happened with the landlords, as well as our other community-based organizations that helped submit applications on behalf of an applicant, is while the landlord can get a unique, ID and password and login and answer questions and start the process, many times what they did was they sat with their tenant and helped the tenant create their own login information and email, and then they were assisting that way. So the portal wasn't set up to identify when that happened, if that makes sense. So it looks like it was submitted from the tenant, when reality that landlord played an active role in helping that tenant apply. So that could be why the numbers are a little bit low, because the same for us, Asusana, where the number of applications submitted that were started by a landlord, is definitely lower in comparison to tenants.
Yeah, I want to echo that too. I think it did highlight the fact that a lot of people were working together, right? It was a tough situation, the impacts that COVID was having, and a lot of landlords were reaching across and helping out their tenant as much as they could. They were trying their best, and tenants as well. Like they were just at that point where they could not pay their rent, and they were reaching out to us for that assistance. And so I think it just shows that partnership that was happening during the past couple of years, people helping each other out. Let's see, I do think one of the data pieces that I didn't share on the slides, but one interesting thing was that the vast majority of the rent awards that we put out there were for about a period of 3 months, right? So you hear the stories of people reaching their capacity at 18 months. But I think that really highlights the fact that we did what the funding did what it was set out to accomplish, which is really just stabilize people. Hey, we need some emergency assistance. I've lost my stability for just a minute, and I need to have a few months to get myself back on solid ground. And so I think that was again, I think the funding really functioned the way it was supposed to, and again, it was a challenge. It was a challenge for all of us to really get the program up, running, functioning, advertised, communicated, fully out to the payments made to the landlords. It was a very big arc getting there, but I just kudos to my teammates here on Housing in South Bay for all the work they did.
Yeah, I commend all of you, because it sounds like there was different tiers to make this program a success, and you all collaborated, partnered, and created a process that worked. I mean, 197 million, that is pretty close to the 200 million that was allocated.
That was one jurisdiction. I think overall it was almost 475 million for the whole
wow.
region.
That's huge. That's huge. We do have another question. Since the jurisdictions also operate Section 8 programs, did you find that landlords confuse this program with Section 8?
I would say not necessarily confused it with Section 8. So there might have been some confusion on how it works with Section 8 participants that we had to clarify for some people, because you could be on Section 8 and receive assistance. So I think that might be some of the confusion, but really that Section 8 program is definitely another help within the community. The thousands of families, low-income families that are stable and not at risk of homelessness because they're getting that Section 8 assistance is out there.
My understanding was if you were on Section 8, you weren't eligible for the rental assistance. Is that true for one of the programs?
So within the county's program, we were able to help those on Section 8. If their portion of rent, if they were missing for some reason their portion of rent, we were able to assist at that level. So.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That was the same for the city. So the regulations only allowed for rental assistance to be paid for the tenant's share of the rent. So the emergency rental assistance program was not paying the entire contract rent, only the tenant's payment
Right.
or portion. And then we were able to provide utility assistance as well. And the benefit is that even when somebody's unemployed and cannot make their tenant share of rent while on Section 8, that housing authority continues to pay that subsidy payment. So landlords are still receiving like most of the time, the bulk of that contract rent payment.
Yeah, no, thank you for the clarification. So, you know, this is our third year of the pandemic. And as you all are aware, you know, our rental assistance programs are, you know, coming to an end, bittersweet. However, there's a strong need out there in the community. I know as a fair housing provider, you know, going to the city council and seeing our community still struggling with rents. Do you feel that this is an answer to tenant protections? Because they're, you know, like many of you mentioned, you know, 3 months of rent and owing 18 months is only putting a Band-Aid on their rental debt. So I guess my question is, do you see tenant protections being important going forward as we end these rental assistance programs?
Well, I would say that ERAP itself was one component in a lot of things that were happening during the time, right? There were moratoriums, there were state protections, there were CDC guidelines. There was a lot that went into, you know, protecting folks and keeping them safe during this time period and housed. So I would say that ERAP played a very important part in that suite of things that were done to help out renters in the community.
Yes. Any
What I
other
think is
perspective?
important is one of the less expensive ways to prevent homelessness is just to provide emergency rental assistance for the months that are past due, right? So it's more cost effective to keep people safely, stably housed within their current housing situation than allowing them to sort of hit the homelessness arena and then trying to find resources to get them back on track with permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing, even transitional housing, as Valerie indicated earlier, those resources are extremely limited, where there's more need than there is sort of resources. So that's why the importance of like these emergency rental assistance funds was so pivotal, right? And keeping people stably housed. Part of the 18-month maximum that we could pay also allowed us to pay up to 3 months of upcoming rent or forward-facing rent, which is extremely important. So for the people who were past due with rent, and 75% of the applicants were at or below 30% AMI. So we saw the most vulnerable at-risk populations coming in and applying. So not only satisfying their past due rent, but allowing us to pay for up to 3 months of future rent also added additional security to ensure that they would remain stably housed after that investment that we made to cure their past due rent.
I can definitely see this program as a permanent program to prevent homelessness and evictions, because right now, as you all know, you know, it's going to snowball into landlords, you know, taking tenants to court after the moratorium date is over, the assembly bill. What is your opinion on that?
Well, I think, you know, we're some of the recent legislation that's happened at the state level is very important, and I think one of those things is a cash flow loan that the state has made available to the locals that are administering the emergency rental assistance program, and what that cash flow loan will potentially do is help us continue to provide ERAP assistance to people that are still in need. while we're waiting on future federal funds. So the way the overall program on the federal level was designed was that if there were states or localities that weren't necessarily in need or were spending the money slower, that the federal government would take that money and put it into areas of need, right? And San Diego has definitely demonstrated that we're an area in need based on the success of these programs. And so I think that's an important thing to note, that the state has helped us in implementing ERAP in more of a continuous manner, as opposed to having to wait for the reallocations to come from the federal government. So again,
that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. With the success of this program, do you feel that there'll be future funds? Have you heard anything, Nick or Valerie or Susana, in regards to more rental assistance? Because we definitely know there's still a need for this.
So I'd like to just sort of build upon what Nick had shared. So with the state cash flow loans that each of our jurisdictions are applying for, we will have enough money to help all eligible households that we still have applications for. So the ones that submitted applications by March 31st before our applications closed, we should have enough money for the ones that are eligible to receive assistance. So hopefully there shouldn't be anybody who is eligible and needing assistance. So we're going to make our programs whole. The program still does, the state cash flow loan does require each of our jurisdictions to continue to apply for any additional federal funding that may become available. And what we've seen so far is that the applications that we submit yield extremely low results. For example, I think the Housing Commission applied for over $200 million between November and January for additional funding, and we've received $15 million of it. So while we're grateful for the 15, the need was definitely greater. So if future federal allocations are received, it would have to exceed the amount of money that we've borrowed from the state in order for us to have access funding to help more families, which is unlikely.
And to add to that, our program will be made whole with the cash flow loan while we're awaiting additional federal dollars, which is great. And as noted earlier, our agency is committed to the homeless prevention arena. So we are fortunate to receive tenant-based rental assistance funding from both the City of National City and the City of Chula Vista. And normally that is meant for unsheltered households, but we are able to use those funds for homeless prevention. So for those who are imminent risk of eviction and utilizing that, and also applying for additional funding through local jurisdictions for like ESG funding for homeless prevention efforts. Again, many of the funds that we have received were for families that were already unsheltered. And so we're trying to get upstream and look at resources for homeless prevention.
Yes, we know that homeless prevention is key. I'm just so grateful that all of you did such a great job in this ERAP process, because as a housing provider, we get these calls every day with the need. I mean, there's still a continued need. My hope and desire is that, we do receive more funding for the rental assistance. As you all mentioned, there's a higher need than there is in the funding. Many other families were probably still waiting for the assistance and weren't able to receive it. So I just want to give each one of you some last words of comments, recommendations, anything that you'd like to add as we wrap up this session. Nick, if you'd like to go first, and then Susana and Valerie.
Sure thing. I think the theme that I want to keep highlighting is that it took a community, it took a village, took a region to get this money spent, right? Every within the county, the board of supervisors support, the sectors within the COVID response network, our teammates here at South Bay and the Housing Commission, all of the cities that we worked with, the community-based organizations, the churches, everyone, the food banks, all the people that it took to really get the word out. It took that. If we'd have just relied on our staff knocking on doors or our internal little group of caseworkers calling people up, it wouldn't have worked. And so I think the theme for me is that it was a tremendous effort, and I think it led to some success. A lot of people were able to remain stably housed. A lot of the rental economy was able to be maintained, and a lot of landlords were keeping their business alive through this program. And so that's it. I just want to say thank you, Stella, for moderating. Thank you to my team here on the panel.
Susana?
I'd like to just add the fact that we've seen that this funding has been extremely successful in preventing people from becoming homeless. And I think we would have seen a far greater number of people becoming evicted once the eviction moratoriums expire had it not been for this program. So I would encourage everybody who has connections with their policymakers, city council, congressional representatives, board of commissioners, board of supervisors, to really just advocate for a longer term permanent source of funding to continue this type of program throughout San Diego County.
And we will have that opportunity later on in this conference, because we'll have those legislators present later. So that's a great point, Susana. Thank you. Valerie?
Yeah, and Nick, you stole my words exactly. I'm going to echo your sentiments. And being not a government entity, but a private nonprofit, a smaller organization, we could not have done this without the support of the City of Chula Vista, the County of San Diego Housing Commission, and like you said, Nick, all of our partners, even CSA and Legal Aid Society, and even our partners up that were doing ERAP outside of our jurisdiction. We all came together. And I think just another plug for the success of this program, I believe, is partially because it was so low barrier, which was really neat. And we're looking at dispersing millions and millions of dollars very quickly, and in an emergency situation, I think low barrier was key. But I do appreciate everyone's support here on this panel. We couldn't have done it without you, for sure.
Thank you. Now, again, I applaud all of you for keeping so many tenants in their homes, giving the ERAP the success that you provided, networking, partners, outreach, the tools you used, everything that, like you mentioned, Nick, it took a village and you all did it together. So thank you so much, Nick, Susana, Valerie. This was a great panel discussion. I just want to, again, tell you how important this data information was. It makes us all feel good at the end of the day that it was a success. And we hope that this ERAP continues to evolve, because our communities in the entire San Diego region really need it. So thank you again. I'm going to switch it over to Laura, if you'd like to take us to break. And before we end, I just want to make sure that everyone in the chat take 2 minutes to do our survey, fill it out, please. And with that said, I will end this session and turn it over to Laura. Thank you.
Thank you, Estella. And thank you, Nick, Valerie, and Susana. What a great session. So rich in data and information, and helping us understand the various components of fair housing as it relates to not only how we build our communities and how we increase access, but how we keep people housed and how we prevent displacement, because preventing displacement is as much a fair housing issue as increasing access to communities. So I'll just give a little bit of a pause, make sure everybody takes a second to click on that link. Please take the time to fill out that survey. Your feedback helps inform our planning for future conferences, so it's very valuable, and we very much appreciate you taking the time to complete that survey. We are going into a break. We'll be back here at 11. As Estella mentioned, we'll be coming back with a panel of local elected officials to be talking about what they're doing in their cities to advance fair housing goals. And it will be an opportunity for all of you to engage with them as well. I'll remind you all of this when we come back from the break, but be thinking about those questions, pop them in the chat. We are trying to make this as interactive as possible during these times where we're still virtual. But we look forward to having you all engage with us at our next session at 11 o'clock. Enjoy the break, and we will see you then. Thank you, everyone. See you soon.